Okay, all set, John. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Okay, I'd like to bring the Public Service Committee meeting together for the April meeting. First, I'd like, does everybody have a chance to look at the minutes for the February meeting?
I'll move the minutes, John.
Thanks, Mary Ann. Second?
I'll second.
Second from Christian. Thoughts, any comments or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Passed. Okay, next we have Teresa with the Justice for Children. You are there, Teresa? Thought I saw her on.
She's talking. She's not coming through though. You got to unmute, Teresa.
Got to unmute Teresa.
Push your space bar.
All right, here we go. I'm
Okay.
about 30 years too young for a boomer moment. Sorry about that.
Okay, you're on now.
I'm just requesting permission to renew our contract with H2H Cleaning Service. We've had them for a few years now, and they're going to renew at the same cost that we've had previously.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Who's moving it?
Gary Maha.
We gotta have somebody from Public Service to move it?
I'll move it.
Okay, moved by Gordy, second by Christian. Thoughts, comments, or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed and so ordered. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you. I'm signing off. Have a good day.
You stay safe.
You too.
Thank you. Mr. Yeager on. Anybody seen Mr. Yeager if he's on?
I haven't seen him.
I make a motion to move this and then he can talk about it at.
Very good. Mary Ann moved it. Do I hear a second?
I'll second. Christian.
Christian second it. Comments or questions?
My own, I was just curious if this is this an annual renewal? And is this something that, does this dollar amount change annually? Is this more than less than last year? You know that, Jay? Just curious. You're on mute, Jay.
It is an annual allocation. It does vary from year to year, depending on the funding. There is a requirement that both law enforcement and emergency management share the resources and distribute them, which is what you see in the backup. And I can't tell you, it's about on par, might be a little bit less than the last couple of years. I don't have the detail, and I don't believe they put it in the resolution as far as the budget impact, which I don't see a resolution in the packet I have. But it is, again, it's part of an annual appropriation that we're getting and requires both our Sheriff's Department and our Emergency Management Office to work together as to the allocation, which you see in there of the whole $109,000, 25% goes to law enforcement, terrorism prevention, 882 and change is to build and sustain the critical capabilities as far as our Homeland Security, the planning that Bill and Tim do. Literally what you're seeing a lot of right now during the C-19 response and activation. But again, it has been something that we've been receiving this kind of funding for easily the last 8 to 10 years.
Jay, did that come in? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mary Ann.
I can't see anybody but like three of us, so I don't know who's talking. Jay, that's coming to Ways and Means on Wednesday, correct?
I haven't seen I haven't looked at the Ways and Means agenda yet, Marion, but I would presume that is the case.
Well, can
Pam,
we
you
just
can
have-
answer that, right?
There is no resolution with this. This is a.
No, this is just an application to apply. I'm sorry, that's why. This is a permission to approve. the application.
So this is permission to prove that they apply for it.
Right, and once the money is actually received, then they'll bring it back with more detail with the resolution. Pam's right, with regard to the allocation of the funding for EMS versus the law enforcement people.
Okay,
I'm assuming they're gonna apply for as much as they can get, so. I would-
Absolutely, they always have, Mary Ann.
Yeah.
There's almost always way more need than what we actually get in this kind of funding.
There's a cybersecurity component to it this year too. We gave them some grant, quotes for cybersecurity improvements.
any further comments or questions? So motion to approve for them to apply.
Motion.
Motion made by Gordy. Do I hear a second?
A second.
Second by Mary Ann. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's passed. Okay, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Tim.
Okay, just a couple items. First one is a bid renewal on our pavement markings. This is our annual contract that we use to stripe the highways, edge line and center line. There is a provision in the contract for marking the airport, but we are not planning on using that at this time. This will be the second renewal on our original contract, which was awarded in 2018. This is I did negotiate with the contractor for a small increase in price of 5% for both the application of white edge line and yellow center line. It's our only price increase since the original contract, so I thought it was more than fair, and I would recommend approving it at this time.
We have a motion.
I'll move it, Christian.
First made by Christian, second it.
I'll second.
Second by Gordy. Comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Go ahead, Gary.
In the resolution, there's no cost. Usually in the resolve, there's a cost, like so much a mile. I mean, how much are we spending? 5,000 or 100,000? We really don't know from this resolution.
There are several bid items in the contract. I didn't want to list them all in the resolution because there's per center line mile for yellow, per edge line mile for white. There's railroad markings, hazard markings, stop bars, yield bars. There's a whole number of things. We basically contract out, we budget out for about $165,000 of marking services throughout the year. It's budgeted into the county road fund and we wouldn't plan on exceeding that number. I will tell you from a past history on edge center line mile, it's usually about $300 per center line mile, roughly. I don't have the exact figures in front of me. I'm just coming off my memory, but an edge line mile, it's usually about $170 per edge line mile.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions?
Should there be at least a maximum, not to exceed?
We don't exceed what's in our budget. It's 100, usually we're less than that, but the budget's for 165,000. We usually stay under that.
Okay, can they resolve specify that, please?
We add that to the resolved, subject to the budget limits of 165,000.
I'll make a motion to amend that to reflect it.
Thank you, Mary Ann. I hear a second.
I'll second it.
So not to exceed.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Gordy. Motion been made and seconded for the amendment to the resolution. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's passed.
Tim, just quickly, how long does the paintings, the pavement markings last?
That's a good question. We apply them every single year.
Okay.
The length that they last depends completely on how harsh our winter was in terms of how much plowing was done, where they are, if they're on a road that gets a lot of farm traffic with a lot of dirt and grime kind of ground into the pavement. Those markings might last 6 months. Some of our lower volume roads, if we have decent winters, you could actually get 2 years out of them. But it's waterborne paint, so we do plan on painting the lines every single year.
Okay, that's the difference, that we've had to change environmentally as to the product we use.
Yes.
Thanks.
I have one question.
Yes.
So Tim, does this still include in the bid those road miles for the local municipalities that we charge them back for?
Our county budget does not include any mileage. It's for towns. We don't do any chargebacks. We do open this contract up for piggybacking so that any town that wants to use our contract can do so. They just use our bid prices for marking. I would say that probably 11 of the 13 towns do use it. Traditionally, Darien and Pembroke have used their own contractor for whatever reason, but most everybody piggybacks on us. We do centrally coordinate the, when the marking is done. We provide the contractor the map, tell them kind of where to go, when to go, what gets marked. We have all the logbooks for all the towns, but they are responsible for paying the contractor directly through their own budgets.
Thank you.
And some of the towns don't do any center line striping.
Correct.
Okay, Tim, item number 2, the bid rejection of the hydraulic excavator.
So along the lines of trying to control expenses relative to the impact we're going to see with the virus in terms of sales tax and things, we had a capital expense out of our road machinery fund for a hydraulic excavator. We had budgeted, it was basically a lease purchase, a 5-year lease purchase. We had budgeted about $75,000 a year through the next 5 years to purchase this equipment. We did bid it, but at this time, again, to hold back some expenses that we think we can wait on, we would like to reject all of the bids. I think we could probably milk another 2 to 3 years out of this piece of equipment. Having the extra $75,000 will remain in surplus in the road machinery fund and hopefully allow us, when we start doing 2021 budgeting, to not really have to rely on so much revenue coming from either general fund or county road fund sources.
Get a motion?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Gordy. Motion been made and seconded. Comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Okay, Tim, number 3, the award of bid of airport storage building.
Okay, this item was the building that we talked about in Ways and Means about a week ago. This is basically a pole barn structure at the airport. We have proposed demolishing an existing pole barn that is at the airport. It was an original structure at the airport. It was built in the 1960s. It actually predates the operation of the airport. It was an old farm building. We have used it in the past to store facility maintenance, small facility maintenance items. And we used to store our airport tractor in it when the airport tractor was a little bit smaller. The building's in pretty rough shape. It basically has a dirt floor, doesn't have a big enough door for us to put any of our modern equipment in. What we had proposed was building a brand new pole barn in its place. Basically, the county highway forces would tear the building down. And then we put together a bid package for a new pole barn to be constructed on its site. Basically just the frame and the skin of the building. County highway would pour the concrete floor and would do the wiring for the building. We had established a $125,000 capital project from 1% sales tax source earlier this year is where we plan the expenses from. We had received 5 bids for this bid package that we put out. The lowest bid was $109,000 from Thompson Builds, which is about $30,000 less than the second low bidder. So it's a super competitive price. I do realize that we are in a very unusual time, historic time per se, and relative to the virus and its effect on the county, mostly on sales tax. But this is one of those buildings that I would still like to move forward. It does provide us a place to store our fuel equipment inside, which is really the driving factor for me. Currently, we have been storing our fuel equipment in the old blue T hangars closest to the runway. Those facilities are abandoned at this point. They're basically not usable for storing airplanes in. We had the 2 fuel trucks in one of the hangars where the doors actually still open and operate. This keeps the fuel trucks out of the cold weather, cold wind, and keeps the fuel lines from freezing up, which is our primary problem. We did have an outside area to store those pieces of equipment where we had put some plugs in on one of the apron projects where we can plug in some block heaters for those equipment, but the block heater only heats the engine end of the truck and it doesn't deal with the fuel delivery end of the truck. With the cold temperatures we get sometimes in the winter, and with the really more so the heavy winds that we get out there, the fuel lines on the delivery end of the truck have frozen up, and basically puts that equipment out of service for a few days each winter, and basically makes it so we have no way to sell Jet A to either helicopters or jets coming in and out of the airport. And again, that would, right now, that our biggest impact on that would be Mercy Flight. They do have a small tank there that they can use, but it's pretty limited in size. The blue hangars where we've been storing the 2 trucks are being torn down in a separate project, covered 100% funded by the FAA. That project needs to move ahead. It's actually, we just opened bids on it on Friday. And again, the FAA wants that project to move forward this summer, and will likely issue a grant based on the bids we just received. So we're really not going to have a place, at least a viable place to store the 2 fuel trucks other than outside if we don't move the other storage building forward. The other side benefit, and it's not nearly as critical as the fuel equipment, is it would provide us another place to store large equipment that we use for mowing at the airport, as well as a place to store our grader on site at the airport, which we've never had the capability of doing before. We've always used the grader that's at the highway department on Cedar Street. We mount the snow blower to the grader and we actually drive it back and forth through the city, with the wing and the blade of the grader. It's not an unsafe trip, but it's not an easy trip to make to the airport back and forth either. So we would love to be able to store that piece of equipment at the airport on site, and then the trip through the city just becomes a pickup truck rather than a large piece of construction equipment. So that, again, the new building would provide us a place to store the fuel trucks, the grader with the snow blower, our mowing equipment that we use at the airport, as well as a lot of the facility maintenance stuff that doesn't really have a place to be stored downtown. And again, the project, the low bid was $109,000, which was $30,000 less than our next closest bidder. And we would fund it under the project that's funded from 1% sales tax.
Could I get a motion to open this up for discussion?
I'll move it before we discuss.
Motion made by Mary Ann. Do I hear a second?
Second it.
Who seconded it?
Christian, second it.
Okay, motion made by Mary Ann, seconded by Christian. Comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question and a comment.
Go ahead, Gary.
Tim, with the last Ways and Means, you were going to check with some airports to see if they store their fuel trucks inside or outside. Do you have a chance to do that?
We did. It's a little bit of both. Most larger airports like us in Buffalo and Rochester have places indoors to store their equipment. There are still some that store them outside, but they are not as active with their jet sales as we are. So it doesn't hurt them necessarily to have their jet truck out of service for a day or two here and there in the wintertime.
I have some concerns you'll spend this kind of money. We all agree we got a problem with our sales tax. We don't know what there's going to be. The uncertainty in this year's budget and next year. There was an article in the Daily News last Saturday, and they quoted the county manager with his concerns. We talked to the towns and villages. We're going to stop capital projects unless they're essential. I don't think this is essential at this time. I think there's workarounds. You said to yourself that plugs that heat the blocks. Maybe you drive it. If there's some way you can keep those fuel lines from freezing, I think. And I don't think driving the grader from the highway to the airport is a big deal. I think we ought to put this on pause for a year and see what our budget looks like at that time and reevaluate it.
Thank you, Gary. Any other comments or questions? Gordy?
Yeah, it's not that I'm against the project at all. I understand it, and I appreciate Tim taking some time over the weekend, sent me some additional information. We had some conversation back and forth, and Jay was involved, and I have a better understanding that it's not that I'm against the project overall, but I would like to see us somehow make it through this coming winter into give it another year to see where we're going on this whole thing. And it's just, it's the same thought process we're applying to a lot of projects through across the county. But I would like to see us, if we can drive the grader one more year, do what we've got to do to keep the fuel lines from freezing up. But then after that, I mean, hopefully things will give us some more, we'll have a little more clarity as to what we can do, what we can't do. And so that's what I'd like to see happen.
Thanks, Gordy. Anyone else with comments or questions? Christian?
I'll just make a comment. Before the call, I was starting to be of the mindset, I think Tim had done a pretty good job of, through all the projects, saving to the tune of, I don't know, $700-800, maybe $1 million between some of the equipment he's cut out, all the other capital projects. He has made some very good arguments. It is going to be a problem with delivering fuel. Knowing how that equipment works on a freezing day, it's going to be an issue. If we want to punt for a year, I would potentially support it, but I was in support of, between all the other dollars he's cut out, he got a very competitive bid, going to do a lot of work on his own. I thought this was still a reasonable request. Some could argue this is, it's one of the more necessary projects that he had in mind. So I was going to support the project.
Further comments or questions?
I have a question.
Mary Ann?
Tim, could you tell me what you anticipate the revenue loss would be if the fuel trucks were out of commission because they were frozen?
I would say, based on past history of when we did have the trucks parked outside, we generally lost between 3 and 5 days a year of operational fuel sales with the jet truck. I don't know that I could give you 100% accurate numbers on losses, because it's hard to know what you didn't lose. But if we were to lose, 2 or 3 jets through the course of a winter for fuel sales, it might be $3,000 to $5,000 probably in our profit that we would see from the fuel sale. So if it was revenue from fuel sales, it would be probably $8,000 to $10,000, and again, we make probably $3,000 to $5,000 on that sale, depending on the price of the fuel.
Any further comments or questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just based on what Christian was alluding to, and for the 2020 capital projects and also asset acquisitions, Tim's basically put off or reduced about $650,000 worth of potential expenses in those 2 categories. And also for the 2021 capital and assets, another $805,000.
Thank you.
Chairman, may I ask a question?
Shelley, yes.
Yeah, I am in support of this project moving forward, which is the potential that we would lose the sale of the jet fuel, along with a greater use of our workforce's time to be able to shelter our equipment, is extremely important because it extends its life. Losing that building is a critical and essential function there at the airport. And I would hate to lose the opportunity of grabbing a hold of this bid because it is so competitive. So I know it's $109,000, but this is investment that the return on this is going to be sooner rather than later, as most of our capital projects.
Thanks, Shelley. Any further comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, can I make one more comment relative to the fuel sales aspect of this? I know Legislator Clattenburg asked about, what are the potential loss? To be honest with you, I think the impact on our reputation of the ability to sell fuel in the winter months would probably be more of an issue for me than the actual dollar value lost. We do get some big jets transient that come through that kind of rely on us. We do have a good runway to land at in the wintertime. It's well taken care of, probably more so than a lot of the surrounding small airports. And I would just hate to hurt our reputation that we've built up the last 20 years. That would be more impactful, I think, than the actual dollars lost over the long haul.
Tim, we have 2 fuel trucks.
We have a Jet A truck and a 100 low lead truck. The Jet A truck's really the truck that I'm concerned about. If we lost the low lead truck for a day or two because of freezing, we still have our self-serve pump that we could fill planes up from. It's the Jet A truck, and that's really our high volume truck. That truck typically will pump anywhere between 1,200 and 2,000 gallons from that truck per plane, depending on the size of the plane. So that's the truck that becomes more critical for us.
Is it roadworthy?
It is roadworthy, but it is not licensed to be on the road. In fact, when it needs to be serviced, we have to haul it on our lowboy tractor to get it back to highway because it doesn't have plates on it.
What would it take to get it registered and licensed?
I don't know. I'd have to check into that.
Could the possibility of get it registered and licensed, keep it at the highway, and then we need it, we could run it out?
It's something I can definitely look into. I will add the other piece of information that I promised at Ways and Means that I would check into is I did ask the contractors whether they would hold their bids. Thompson Builds did indicate to me that they'd be willing to hold their bid for up to 60 days, or I'm sorry, 60 to 90 days. And of course, depending on coronavirus, if this gets lifted and they have an influx of work, they might not be in a position to take our contract, but they did say they would hold it for at least 60 days if we wanted to explore a few more options in between.
Any further comments or questions?
It's a question.
I just said, go ahead, Gordy, I'll go after you.
All right. Just a question. The building that you would want to put up to store the fuel trucks in, would it be heated or is that not heated?
It would not be heated. We would still be plugging the equipment into block heaters, but it would get us out of the wind. Again, it's the wind on the delivery end of the truck that causes the problem. It's not really the temperature. We can keep the engines running on block heaters. It's just that you get a day like this where you've got 40-mile-an-hour winds in the wintertime. It just freezes up the back end of the the hose reel and the things that are selling the fuel, not necessarily the truck itself.
Mary Ann?
I just wanted to say that I know that Tim has deferred a lot of projects. I think it's close to $1 million worth of projects, and this was one that he's prioritizing and asking us for. I know that the current situation is not going to be the same. We're not going to have those hangars to store them in because they have to be torn down. And we're going to get 100% funding to do that, which we didn't think was going to happen, and now we are. So I'm going to support this knowing that I think it's a competitive bid. Our workforce will have the time to do this and contribute a lot of this work towards the construction. And I think in the long run, the risk to our equipment and the loss of the sales and knowing that we have to do it anyway at some point, it's worth doing it now. So I'm going to support it.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Any further comments or questions? If not, let's vote on the resolution. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Sounds like 3, 4, or what, 1 against, so it sounds like it's passed. So we passed that resolution. What else you got on there, Tim?
The next resolution was a resolution that we had set forward in March. It was tabled during the legislature meeting and returned to committee. I have amended the project to reflect some changes relative, again, to stripping out some of our capital projects in an effort to preserve 1% sales tax. I have, from the original resolution, eliminated the projects that I felt could be deferred, and I retained 2 critical projects that both impact fire alarm systems, which are currently inactive or not working, and or don't have parts available to repair in their current condition. That would be the fire alarm system at the highway garage and the fire alarm control panel at 5130 Main Street. Those 2 projects together represent about $112,000. They would be funded from sales tax. They were part of the 2020 capital plan. I did, again, modify the resolution that you saw in March, eliminating the DX unit at the sheriff's building, the HVAC project for the fire training center, the chiller that we planned for the new courts facility, and also the two projects for the parks, one which was the siding at the Interpretive Center and a parking lot that we had planned at Pavilion 2 at DeWitt Park. Not moving those projects forward saves us or preserves us really about $442,000 and 1% sales tax. So I'd like to present this resolution to you again just to approve the two projects out of the original, I think 6 or 7 that were originally planned.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Here, a second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Gordy. Comments or questions?
Chairman, I have a question.
Go ahead, Gary.
Tim, does the highway department currently have a fire alarm system? And if it's out of service, how long has it been out of service?
We do currently have a system. It's a kind of a hybrid system. The fire alarm system that is in the original storage building is the original fire alarm system for the building from 1982. There are portions of the fire alarm system that were upgraded in the admin end of the building, kind of the office side. Our system is partially functioning. Many of the heads in the garage, the smoke heads and the heat detectors in the garage are not working. The stuff that's covering the office end of the facility still is functioning. The control panel does get signals, but it shows basically a constant trouble and a supervisory alarm at all times. So we've actually discontinued the contact to the alarm center because we would basically call twice a day if that was still connected. What has happened, we believe, is in the storage garage over time, the cabling for the smoke heads and heat detectors has been, we're having ground faults. So either the sheathing on the wiring for those units is wearing thin or dry rotted and it's grounding out against the actual facility itself, or we just have a number of bad heads, which we also know we have. So the $97,000 would more or less go towards all new heat detectors in the garage, the wiring that's needed, and then the upgrade of the fire alarm control panel, which is just outside of the RTS dispatch center.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? The only comment I have is you'll notice that over the years, you've seen a lot of fires in highway departments and whatnot. That's due to a lot of times is rewiring for lights for plowing and whatnot. And we have a lot of dollars worth of equipment. How much equipment do you think we have in there, Tim?
It's between $5 and $6 million.
So with that being said, I say there's been a lot of fires in highway departments, and I think it'd be worth it to protect that all that equipment that we have in there.
And just a side note too, I don't have the final details on it yet at this point. But we do have, because we rejected the change order with Johnson Controls on the Fire Training Center HVAC project, we will now have an $88,000, basically a bonus or surplus in that project from the NYSERDA grants and some of the buybacks that we received from Niagara Mohawk and things like that. Once the Johnson Controls project can be closed out, we would have $88,000 that I could ostensibly put toward these two projects, but I just didn't have that information with me at this point. And I would be more than glad to bring that to committee in the future to amend the funding source of this project, which would be, 88 out of 112 would be a pretty sizable share of that.
Very good. Any further comments or questions?
On that one, I see Scott rubbing his hands together. He's loving that.
So am I.
Very good. Any further comments or questions? If not, all those in favor of the resolution say aye.
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 Opposed? That's passed. Number 5, Tim, closing of capital projects.
And again, this is part of the greater effort to, preserve sales tax money. These are two projects that we have, the Park and Forest Boardwalk was completed and has a very small balance in it. The All Season Pavilion project, we never progressed because we had a follow-on project for a septic system for that pavilion that was not successful in being funded, and this project never moved forward. I would recommend closing this project out as well And that would free up between the two of them about 180,000 in sales tax. Again, that would be a preservation of money critical for this year and next year.
Very good.
I'll move it.
Moved by Christian,
I'll
seconded
second.
by Mary Ann. Comments or questions?
I have a quick question. Excuse me, a quick question. In the first whereas it said these were included in the 2020 capital plan. That wouldn't be correct then, would it, Tim?
No, my apologies. I think I probably cut and paste the resolution when I was working on them, and I just didn't catch that. You could probably just eliminate the second half of that first whereas.
Need an amendment to that?
I'll move it.
Motion made by Mary Ann, amend that change in the resolution. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Gordy. Comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Pass. Is that on the amendment? Now I gotta pass the resolution? Or is that all in one?
No, I'll move the amendment of the amended resolution.
Mary Ann,
Second.
second by Gordy. Comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and passed. Anything else, Tim, you got for us? I don't see any on the agenda.
No, that was it. Just hoping the wind doesn't take any trees down for us.
Yeah, they're back in that forecast down a little bit too, fortunately, so.
Yeah.
I had a question for Tim.
Go ahead, Shelley.
Tim, you indicated that they're putting the jail on pause. There might be some activity and repairs that need to happen there. Do you have an idea of when we might see that list along with the costs?
I would probably, I can do it. I was planning on doing it this summer when we do our capital project plan update. But if it's something that you'd like to see sooner than that, I have all the data in our dude system. We did all the capital forecasting on all the facilities, even the old jail. So we do know what we need to do, and I can definitely get you that list ahead of time if you'd like to see that.
I would think that being aware sooner rather than later would help us make better decisions going forward, Tim. Thank you.
Certainly. I can bring it to committee in May.
Anything else for Tim? Before he leaves, Pam, are you clear on the amendments that we passed tonight?
I am. I just need, though, if you would go back to the bid renewal for pavement markings, a final vote on the amended resolution.
Okay,
I'll move it.
thank you, Mary Ann. I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Gordy. Comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That's passed. I guess that's all we got for you, Tim. Thank you for your hard work and stay safe and keep the roads open.
Yep. Have a good evening. Stay healthy.
You too, thanks. County manager.
Couple things, as you know, and Tim mentioned it, National Grid is heavily mobilized for the next 24 to 48 hours here in Western New York, including our county, as far as any potential disruptions, any down lines, any failed poles or knocked over or destroyed poles from tree work or other things of that nature. They did a conference call yesterday afternoon to assure everybody and gave us each contacts. And ours is as typical as Paul Geister, who's right here in Genesee County on a regular basis with regard to a contact person should there be very specific items that we need to address or have questions about over the next 12 to 14 hours as far as how long this event, which has been lessened somewhat by National Weather Service items. Also, we have again had a conference call this morning with various staff of the city and the county with regard to where we are as far as getting more supplies in for the C-19 response, whether it's PPE or masks. One thing we are apparently, pardon the expression, awash in is the hand sanitizer from the state prisons. But the other items are still scarce and not necessarily at this point. Is there any timeline, excuse me, when Paul and Tim and Bill Schutt expect any of the caches to come in that provide those kind of items that we have a list of priority operations that need to be distributed here. That includes also the swab kits. They are still very scarce in general. And that's why our testing has been very limited, but only to those who are very symptomatic. But again, also present potential issues with regard to either work environment or relations to other people who we have to do the contact testing for. Paul and Tim both put out their daily reports this afternoon at about 4 o'clock. And I believe they are distributed to all you folks also. So read that information because that is almost real time with regard to the number of positive cases, but also the other issues that they're dealing with here in the county, both from an equipment standpoint, but from a public health department mobilization effort, which obviously also includes some workforce from other parts of county operations to help them do the contact tracing, as they call it.
Anything else, Jay?
Sir.
All set? Pam?
Your next meeting is Monday, May 18th.
Thank you. That's it. Okay, I have nothing further. Thank you, everybody, for their hard work. And once again, I'm proud to be a member of this county administration. We got a lot to be proud of. Everybody out there is doing a great job, I think.
Amen to that, Mr. Chairman.
Agreed.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Motion made and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
aye.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you.